If we could start up our recordings, and that's all we need. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Force-Space. Thanks for joining us for today's working session, Building a Common AI Lexicon. I'd like to begin first, however, by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. We respect the continued connections with the past, the present, and future, and our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Here at Force-Space, as you may know, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions, projects happening all across the university. Now, just a little bit behind the scenes, we are running today's workshop as a Zoom meeting. So those of you joining us on Zoom, our team, Force-Space team, I'm Douglas, he, him, we have Bertie running the switch. We've got Isa on cams and Jax helping out in the Zoom. We're here to kind of make that connection with everyone on Zoom. That's what our cameras are doing, but you can definitely use the chat and you can direct message us on Zoom. Those of you here in the space, our cameras are primarily for people on Zoom to see. We're not live streaming here as we often do, but we are recording. But the idea, which Lindsay's going to explain a little bit more, is to kind of record more of the ideas of the voice of the lexicon vocabulary. Okay, that's enough for me. We will be running microphones around to you. That was my last note, so that everyone on Zoom can hear and at our recordings as well. Okay, it's very much my pleasure now to pass the microphone over to our advisor in knowledge mobilization with the Applied AI Institute, Lindsay Rogers. Lindsay, it's great to have you.
Why, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks, everyone. So, yeah, I'm really glad that everyone is here. I'll just start by saying a few words about the Applied AI Institute, the PowerPoint's over there, and introduce the project a little bit, and then describe how the event will flow. Thank you. Thanks so much, as always, to the Force-Space for having us here. Applied AI. Does anyone here not know about the Applied AI Institute? Or maybe this is their first encounter with it? Okay, so the Applied AI Institute is a relatively new institute that coordinates AI research and development across campus. It's interdisciplinary. We have an AI adoption team on site. We have responsible AI coordinator. We work with researchers across all the Concordia faculty, and we work with business, civil society, governments, basically to find ways for responsible AI adoption. We do work related to gender diversity in AI. There's always a lot happening, so please sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already, and feel free to get in touch. Okay, so this project, I'm excited about, even if I don't have a kind of clear vision of what the end result will be. So maybe if something emerges in your minds today that you'd like to suggest or think about, let me know. I'm happy to hear anything you're thinking about this. But this is the agenda. I made this morning, so what I thought was coming next wasn't, because there were some last-minute changes. But I do just mostly want to talk a little bit about why this project is interesting to me. So in my role as knowledge mobilization advisor at the Applied AI Institute, with a background in cultural studies, I've really been meeting and learning a lot about research and work that's happening in fields that I am very unfamiliar with. So sometimes it will be the case that I either know the words individually that people are using, but I don't know what they mean in the context that they're using them in. You can probably relate to some of that. Like, I felt like I knew what that word meant, but the way you're using it is making it unfamiliar to me. And then there's also just words that I'm not familiar with. I know that the words and terms that come from my background, I feel like they're very important and everyone should know them. So I'm hoping that other people feel like that too. And the more we know about the frameworks and ideas that we're all using, the better able to communicate, to do interdisciplinary work, which is always kind of more I feel like, rich and layered than one discipline that's kind of bound within a particular way of looking at things that's necessarily partial. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to bring this forward. I also wanted to say thanks to Jada, Valeria, if she's here, and Robert for having some of these early conversations with me and giving some, being a bit excited about the idea. So it felt like it was something I could move forward with. But in those conversations, we started talking about different words. I think one of them was like architecture, something else that have particular meanings in the context of computer science and different meanings outside of it. So another thing is that I was reading this book, Mother Tongue, The Surprising History of Women's Words, and it was really, there was so much interesting information in there about how words were used and what they meant kind of early on in history and how they're used and what they mean now, and how the meanings that we associate with the different words change over time and shape how we can understand a topic or an idea. So one of the examples that she gave in an interview and in the book was the word woman or women. And we don't actually know the source of that word. It might be something related to weaving or waving compared to how the body moves or the work that it does. And so I guess this is another way of just paying attention to the ways that we're using words now and having that as a thread as we move into the future, and these might change, especially with generative AI. So it does homogenize, flatten our vocabularies. It's just completes patterns. So thinking about some of the patterns that are in the text that is available in the data on the internet, thinking about how the associations, or I forget the person's name who calls them generics, but the ways that if words are often attached in some way, then we forget that they don't need to be attached, and we forget the ideological assumptions kind of attaching them to one another in the first place because they just seem like common sense. So if you're not thinking about it or you don't know the origins, those layers underneath attaching them might be invisible. And that's part of why I liked this woven image, because it reminds me of a tapestry where if you're just looking at the picture on top, you don't know it's held together by all these knots underneath and what the strings are. And yeah, interdisciplinary research. So I thought maybe it would be helpful to have some of my thoughts in putting this together before we get started. And could we go back to the next slide, maybe, or back to the last? Oh, that's me. I have the thing. But I lost it. I don't even remember being over here. Okay, so yeah, the next part will, some people have volunteered, and I'm very grateful for sharing some words that they've contributed to a glossary. We'll just talk about what the word is, use it in a sentence, define it, and explain why it might be important or why it is important. Then we'll have just conversations with each other, go into breakout sessions, try and find someone from a different professional or academic background than you and talk about your professional work or even your interests in ways that are like very jargon heavy, which might be a nice departure from trying to use simple language, so that we can identify as many kind of unfamiliar different words as we can. On the Post-it notes, write down all of the words that you're unfamiliar with. Then later we can stick them up on this table here and also build some word associations with them. So if you have a different understanding or connection to some of the words, you can write it down on the paper and we can kind of map meaning visually that way. You'll be welcome to share more words if you think about them through one of these microphones. And then we'll kind of wrap it up, come back together, and that's it for now. Okay, lightning talks. We're just going to start going through the words. If people have like something they want to say in response to the words that are being shared, or they have a different definition or a different way of thinking about it. I'm hoping that this will just be pretty casual and relaxed, and you can take a mic and just share some of your thoughts and ways of thinking about it. It'll be very conversational, I'm hoping. Are we ready for the first word? Am I calling up the words, or are you going to call them up, Doug?
You can call them out, Lindsay, if you want. Sure. I'll run microphones, though, if people don't have them.
Responsible. Interesting word in this time. In all times, maybe.
Okay, cool. So, shall I stand? Shall I turn? Okay, so I work at the Applied AI Institute as a responsible AI specialist. So the word responsible here in terms of AI looks at ways in which AI can be used that's ethical, that's fair, that's safe, and that's transparent. And I think sometimes when we say responsible AI, people think of, I guess there are two ways to look at it. Responsible AI, that's kind of wagging a finger at the innovation and saying this is not good innovation, let's be careful of AI. But there's also responsible AI that's saying this is great innovation. How do we just make sure that it's safe, it's good for everyone, and it does more good than harm? So even in the context of AI, the responsible has multiple ways of defining it, and then we all know responsible also in many other contexts as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Debbie. And I'm sure I'm saying something that Robert would like to say, actually, but I'll go ahead and share it. Is responsibility conversation in AI and how that may have become kind of almost like a washing off of responsibility in this paradoxical way, right? And coming from kind of indigenous AI context. And this is a conversation that we've had with one of our co-directors, a Maori scholar and astronomer, talking about, so Robert asked this question, that's why I kind of pointed to him, like, what do you think about responsible AI? And they were saying, this is not how they would go around it, because responsibility kind of assumes some kind of, like, who is responsible for what is kind of not really clear when we're just saying responsible AI. It's as if the agent itself is responsible. Like, what is the actual responsibility there? So this is kind of an ongoing, I think, I'm having trouble also gearing my head around how to approach with proper terminology that also embraces and doesn't efface these kind of, concerns around the kind of lexicons that we're employing when it comes to AI technologies, I guess.
Is this on? Oh, hey. Thank you, Jada. Yeah, basically that's kind of what I had been thinking about too. I think, like, for me, the one thing that really, when we're talking about responsible AI, or this notion of responsible, like, it's inherently relational. Responsibility in and of itself is a meaningless thing. It's always responsible to who or to what, or it's always in a relational context that something has to be responsible or deemed responsible or irresponsible. And so I think there's a really, I don't really know what I'm getting at with that, but I think that sort of a relational element is really important to think about when we're thinking through, all this range of concepts, from ethical AI to responsible to socially beneficial to this to that. It gets really confusing. It's like, what are we talking about at the end of the day? So I'll stop there before I ramble, but thank you for bringing up this word. It's a tricky one.
If I can just add, as you talked about it being relational, this is going to be maybe a little bit of a segue, but I think there's this pop culture term of with great power comes great responsibility, right? And when you think about AI, the power of the technology brings great responsibility, but in some ways it's faceless power, right? the power is out there, and anyone who has access kind of has power. The creators have power, the users have power. So when we say great power comes great responsibility, who's actually holding that power and who's holding that responsibility, and how do we keep them accountable, right? Because like anyone can technically do whatever they want if they have access. So there's also that.
This is great. This is what I was hoping for. Thank you for sharing and for responding. Anything else before the next nature-based solutions?
Hi, everyone. Camilo. So I guess this is more environmental science concept. So nature-based solutions are any actions that work with and try to enhance nature to address societal challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequality. So it's a broad concept. And so how, in which sentence can I use it? Like, so nature-based solutions can help us to solve the climate crisis, for example. That's a way that it could be used. But for me, it like is like obviously like we work around this word and the concept behind it. But for me, it's important to bring it here because even if it sounds like very environmental science specific, I don't know, like it has different interpretations. So, and in the context of decision making, it can mean different things. So let's say for the European Commission, they would say that building some environmentally friendly infrastructure, let's say something that is treating wastewater, that is a nature-based solution. But that is not the idea about the concept. The idea is that when you talk about nature-based solutions, you're talking about like ecosystem, like working with ecosystems, even if they are sometimes like artificial. But you are dealing with biodiversity. You're dealing with ecosystems. So, but I guess some sectors are trying to catch this concept and use it in another way that does not necessarily mean that you are doing some action with and for biodiversity. So that is important for me to make a distinction between nature-based solutions that are like working with ecosystems, relying on ecosystems, and we can separate that with, let's say, like nature-inspired solutions. So I don't know, I created a building thinking about the properties of bamboo. Okay, great, but that is not a nature-based solution. Or there's also like nature-derived solutions. So I'm working with solar energy. So I guess there's some relation with nature, and maybe you're like contributing to nature, doing or doing solar energy infrastructure, but that is not a nature-based solutions either. So that's why I think it's important to clarify what do we mean with these concepts. So I'm happy to share. But first, anyone with a question or anything, happy to answer. Yeah.
Just so that folks online can hear. Oh, yeah, sorry. No worries. It was just like if you can maybe explain like with a clear example like the difference between nature-based solution and you said derived.
Right. Yeah.
Because okay, if I use solar panels to whatever do something for a social purpose, that's not a nature-based solution, or is
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
okay. But what would be a pure nature-based solution instead of a derived?
Yeah, so I guess if you think about a reforestation project or establishing a protected area, so it means that you are, yeah, probably I should have mentioned that, mentioned some examples. Like you're like dealing directly with an ecosystem, like you're performing some kind of intervention in an ecosystem. Like, and that means that you have like different living organisms interacting with each other. So that would be a nature-based. But then a nature-derived, like if you're producing, let's say, solar energy, well, I guess like Well, yes, you have the sun, but that is not. But you don't need a working ecosystem to do so. Like we're a healthy ecosystem if you wanted to do so. So that would be the difference. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other?
I'm rolling my eyes at myself because I put cauliflower in my mouth right before this. But the interesting part for me in this is not just that it's nature-based, like what is the difference between based and derived, but also the word solution, because it kind of puts in the context of like there was a problem and now we're trying to solve it. So I think of like at the not the biodome, the botanical gardens. They do pest control by introducing other insects that are healthy competitors to the pests that they're trying to eliminate. I assume that would be, for example, a nature-based solution because it's kind of recreating an ecosystem where the pest that they're having a problem with is not like the largest pest. Or like when you put in the example of reforestation, I'm assuming that the problem would be like, for example, soil degradation or a lot of soil runoff because there's no trees there. So you want to put trees there so that they can hold onto the soil and it cannot end up in as many rivers. So you're nodding. So I'll just tell that to the people on the Zoom. So I feel like those were potentially examples. I just wanted to make sure that I really understood it in the context of the word solution. And then my question would be, where do you see the kind of crossover between this like term that's used primarily in climate science, if I'm correct?
Environmental science.
Environmental science, yeah. Correct me anytime I'm wrong, because I just am saying stuff. Just like the AI context, like, do you see it primarily because it is being used by, like, it's like become a term that is somewhat greenwashed, or like where is the overlap? That's my question.
Yeah. Good questions. So I guess I want to react to your first comment. Like, I mean, nature-based solutions are not all the time solutions, to be honest. So imagine like some people say, oh yeah, we're gonna do like some reforestation project, and they do a monoculture. So that is not exactly, I guess, the deep meaning of what we imply, or at least like environmental scientists imply with nature-based solutions, because it's not that you're bringing like biodiversity with this solution, right? So in the context of AI, I guess my answer is very pragmatic. So we have a work that tries to use AI to inform the nature-based solutions. So I guess we are trying to leverage the capacity of AI to tell us where it would be most cost-effective, where would you have the largest impact to perform this kind of actions. So that is the concept I'm bringing this. And of course, it has been like, I guess, a conversation around AI and sustainability brings very often like this concept. So I presume that is another reason why we should bring clarification as the use of the term, I guess, permeates different contexts, including the AI community. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Andrea, and I work with Camilo, and I pushed him to submit this term. But just to respond to the sort of why, like, where's the AI overlap? Because this term is being used in climate policy. It's being used in sort of greenwashing circles. It's being used for biodiversity and ecosystem services science. And when you start having AI that's just scraping the web for terms, you know, sometimes the AI can't distinguish with what Camilo just said, you know, which is truly a nature-based solution, which is not. So I think that's where the overlap comes, and why we wanted to make, you know, this community of what we mean when we say nature-based solutions, because the term is being used in many documents, and we know that, you know, those documents are being read by machines now. So that's that.
Thank you so much for this one. I really, this is a term that really, don't, I guess, deal directly with a lot, but more the term solutions itself, like it kind of is building on what was just discussed, but like, because I work a lot on the term of like techno-solutionism and stuff like that. And so for me, when I hear solutions, the first thing I think, like you kind of mentioned, is like the problem solution, a very engineering-based way of thinking, but also is just like when I hear solutions, I just think Band-Aid. I think it's not necessarily geared towards fundamentally changing the underlying structures or systems that are causing, for example, the climate crisis. It's just kind of Band-Aid solutions. And obviously that's like overgeneralizing. There's probably a lot of great nature-based solutions out there. It's just, what do you guys feel that the use of the term solution particularly is changing? And is that something we can maybe reflect on more in the broader AI space?
I can say something.
Yeah, of course.
I guess when I think of solutions, I think of people coming up with, I guess, for the lack of a better word, answers. And when I think of nature-based, I think that the people coming up with these solutions may not be the people who are being chased by the most capital or the people who are the most resourced. So in that case, in my mind, I'm seeing people fighting for better solutions for the environment, more nature-based solutions, but they may not have the most resource in terms of capital, right? Because most of the things that capitalism is chasing might be more artificial, right? But then I think of it in the context of AI, and personally, the thing that excites me the most about the potency of the knowledge of AI is how it empowers social causes, right? Because the same access to knowledge, information, power that someone in McKinsey who's promoting, I don't know, some solution that's not nature-based has is the same access that the under-resourced organization promoting nature-based solutions have. So for me, in the context of AI, I see a lot more empowerment for those things that would have otherwise been under-resourced, because there's a bit of a leveling of the playing field, at least in the context of knowledge and information, that we can begin to like turn into other kinds of resources to advance our causes. So.
This works? So, hi. So is it maybe not so much that this word might necessarily belong to the AI lexicon, but more so that the concern is that the term might be misrepresented, or I think flattened is something that was used in an earlier slide, and kind of how it affects your area of research? Is that sort of what you're exploring by presenting the term, is how it might be used in contexts that it's not necessarily meaningful to be used in?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But like, I don't know, like you may ask ChatGPT to give you a definition, and then you'll find all these sorts of like different like conceptions about it, as I was saying. And so that is not, I mean, the term is very broad, but that is not helpful in terms of decision making. And I guess it just tying this ideas back to what you both were saying. So you have this broad concept, which is, I guess, and you use the term solution, so it sounds very attractive. So it's like, oh, there was a problem and now we're gonna solve it. And yeah, maybe that's a way to leverage funding, like maybe accelerate action. Governments, private nonprofit organizations are using this. But then I think because the concept is so broad, I guess it's positive in the sense that it can drive some action, but at the same time, even if we have the same definition, it doesn't mean that we have a real transformative vision about this. So I think like some people might, I don't know, it's been used in the context of circular economy, this concept. So I guess like that would say that there's like some transformative vision around this concept, but that is not necessarily the case of, let's say, a bank using the concept of nature-based solutions. So I guess, yeah, there are like advantages and disadvantages with this kind of concept, but I guess I would like to close the idea with saying that I personally prefer nature-based interventions. So you're doing some action like with nature, like, and I guess it is not as ambitious as solutions, but probably it's not as attractive as as using solutions. Yeah. Thanks.
Can I just answer to that? I would also reattach it to the responsible term. Who's responsible for protecting the integrity or meaning of the language? That's specific. I think that that's maybe an interesting bit of thinking to get into later, maybe in the workshops, but the interconnectedness between the responsibility and then the protection of the integrity of the language. And because this is very language driven, I think the exercise, what we're doing here, building a lexicon, and who's responsible for defining terminology when this new technology kind of does it for users, and then users trust the technology and the things that are put out by it. So it's very interesting.
Great. I think we'll move on. But yeah, all good points. I mean, who's defining it? One thing that I do want to mention is just that the words don't have to fit within AI contexts, especially not now. So it's just anything that shapes the way you're thinking about the work that you're doing, or the fun that you're having, or something that you're familiar with. It could be anything, and there could be no clear link to AI at this moment, but I think like just bringing in all of these things that we're thinking about and the words that we're using is helpful. And then of course, as AI continues to like proliferate and appear in every waking moment of our lives, it will be hard. I think it will be harder to find words that don't have some connection to AI than finding coming up with connections to some of the words we have. Golden prompts.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mitali Banerjee Ruths. I used to work at Applied AI Institute, but I now work at Next Gen Cities at Concordia. And outside of that work, I'm also a children's book writer. So my interface with generative AI directly links to my other identity, like being a full-time creative writer. And I submitted this term golden prompts. Raise your hand if you've heard about golden prompts, or give me a thumbs up. Okay. So this term was coined by Brian X. Chen, who's a writer for the New York Times. And he observed that people from all walks of life, students, coders, artists, accountants, they're all experimenting with how to use AI tools. They're out there, they look really simple to use. You type something in a box and answers. Asking questions in the wrong way though, if I assume everybody here has tried, can sometimes produce generic, unhelpful, and sometimes downright incorrect answers. And so what is a golden prompt? It turns out that there's an art to typing in the precise words and framing to generate the most helpful answers. And that's what Brian Chen called the golden prompts. And you might, if you're on social media, you might have seen some of these floating around. There's one like, act as if you're a personal trainer, make me a plan, or whatever. And then another magic set of sentence or phrase that people sometimes type in is, tell me what else you need to do this. So having a conversation with your AI chatbot, asking it to ask you questions so it gets more information to refine a personal answer. And it's gotten so popular that there are different people who come up with golden prompts. They'll try different things for image generation, for video generation. And there's a resource called GitHub, which coders or developers are maybe familiar with. It's a repository of code that people can share. And so GitHub actually has a golden prompt library. And then the New York Times also curates a weekly newsletter where they'll give you different golden prompts that could help you with meal planning or booking travel. And I think like this is also when people talk about, oh, in the future, people will have jobs as prompt engineers. This is what they're talking about, people who have a knack or a knowledge base in a specific domain to come up with the right phrases to get the AI to tell them what they want. So for example, let's say you're in mining or drilling or resource extraction and you know a lot about the field. If you're able to phrase the question in just the right way, you can get good answers. And I find also like experimenting, like I've met in other groups with writers, and they said that, you know, like if you're a writer, oftentimes you can ask or phrase a question in a way that you'll get a better response or a better poem out of the AI than just anybody who's just like, write me a limerick. You know, if you know exactly what to ask or what style to emulate, you're likely to get better results. And they're fun to read. Have it, check out some of the golden prompts and you can try some of them in. And a lot of celebrities are into it too. So they've written their own famous golden prompts, like Hoda Kotb from the morning show, or not the morning show. She does the American talk show. What talk show is that? The Today Show. That's right. Hoda Kotb from the Today Show has one about helping her visualize the future. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it's kind of a great golden prompt, but I'm also scared to see what ChatGPT would say.
My immediate kind of impression of like, I'm assuming it's a pun on like Goldilocks, kind of like it's like a median kind of. That's what I thought about. Kind of like it's this one. This prompt is too incoherent. This prompt is too flat. This one's just right. But my immediate thought when I think about golden prompts is kind of like how people critique. I mean, I have my own. Like, I'm not really entirely. And I don't necessarily entirely agree that like generative AI will only flatten, but at the same time, thinking about how it can have that tendency to flatten, this idea of sort of having a sort of like this like sort of like median approach to getting a prompt like where that results in something perfectly legible or perfectly what you want or anticipate or expect, especially kind of like you mentioned, kind of like the golden prompt for envisioning in the future. You're kind of like you're engineering it to give you a legible vision of a future. So it's kind of like you're processing it in such a way where you're kind of making sure it gives you like something that you would that an individual would consider a coherent vision of the future, and what coherence would be as filtered through this generative model. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of where my head was going.
It's interesting to hear you say that. I hadn't thought about Goldilocks, but I think it came from the idea of gold, the precious metal, like being so valuable and it doesn't tarnish. And I mean, I think it also comes from Brian Chen is an Asian American. I'm Asian American too. And so it's just like gold is just held to be something that retains its value. And it also is something that will work for everybody. So if I type in a golden prompt to my AI chatbot and I get a certain result, it's written in a way that you could also type it into your AI chatbot. And obviously it's going to generate something slightly different, but it will be consistent with what you want to have happen. That it like kind of changes the unpredictability of what the results are going to be. It kind of shapes it.
It's kind of circumscribing the unpredictability. Yeah. So like what are the implications of that in terms of like in respect to when we talk about generative AI having this flattening effect?
I think it's very interesting that one of the reasons why a lot of these systems are super popular is because of the personalized element. My personal assistant, my personal tutor, and I find it quite humorous that in the end we actually maybe prefer a textbook, prefer one source where there's less extremes of responses, there's less ambiguity, as you said. So I think that that's quite funny, that in the end, ultimately, maybe we all want something that is consistent.
I just want to say that we're all in a very particular context. Like we're all at the university, we all have higher education, you know, we all read and write. But these AI tools, like somebody said before, anybody can access them of any age. And so sometimes just knowing the language to get the result, you're like, I saw that my friend like had AI plan all of her meals, but then I went and typed it in and It gave me recipes that don't work. Like why is one working or the other? Or, my buddy just uploaded this really hyper-realistic gorilla video that he generated with AI, and I want to make a video with an AI-generated gorilla, but how do I get that video? So as artists and people are seeing AI-generated content, they're like, how do I create that effect, or how do I create similar artwork? So it's not just text-based, but also AI is being used to generate images that have a certain look, certain style, certain feel, videos that are hyper-realistic or that recreate different things, and different people are trying to figure out, how do I also do that? So in the same way that I guess artists would teach somebody a technique, golden prompts are teaching, like, I guess, prompt engineers or writers, or there's not really a term for who these people are, of like how you use this tool. Just like how you would use a brush, how you would use a canvas, how you would use any other tool.
I guess the other, I appreciated, Mitali, your take on like gold being a precious metal, something that's rare, expensive. But then also in the context of AI, I remember in that era of like prompt engineering, when people were coming up with great prompts. I was a student at the time, and I thought I'd come up with this hack where I was like, I don't need to figure out the prompts. I can have the AI figure out the prompts. So I had this thing where I'll tell the AI that, oh, you're the prompt engineer, come up with this prompt. Then it'd come up with a prompt. Then I'd say, oh no, this prompt, I give it a C+. Come up, it's a great prompt, but then I'll be like, oh, it's a C+. Come up with an A+ prompt, and then like it'll keep like outdoing itself, and then it'd come up with this like really great prompt. And so bringing that context to the idea of gold being rare and being something that you struggle to get. And back to this idea in some ways of responsible, but then also in some way is of like AI being the leveler. Like anyone can have access to this gold, even if you don't have a list of golden prompts, you can in some ways like create it. So, unlike gold that you'd have to like have certain access and privilege to mine, what's fascinating about AI is that anyone can create their own gold, right? Which is a different kind of, I guess, like power.
And some people are selling golden prompts. Like if you search online, there are people who have written golden prompts that you can now spend money to buy. Like I have 10 golden prompts that will unlock your social media growth, or, like it is becoming something that's being commoditized and sold.
This is making me think, because right now I'm listening to the audiobook of The Lathe of Heaven, the Ursula Le Guin book. And so when you were saying that it's this very like median or middle ground, it made me think of the character. It's a character in a book who has what's called effective dreams. And so what they dream comes to life, is enacted. So they have to meet their, what's the best way to get this out? They end up meeting with someone who's analyzing them. This person wants to take advantage of the fact that they're dreaming effectively, and it's kind of like prompting outcomes that on the one hand seem like positive or good for all of us. And then on the other hand, there was a prompt to end kind of racism, color-based discrimination, that kind of thing. And so when they woke up the next day, everybody was gray. So it was like these histories had not existed in this place. And so I'm thinking like the more we're prompting, we're using the same prompts, we want that consistency to bring us these ideas of like meal planning. How much are we ultimately maybe turning things gray in this way? So what I mentioned before about the tapestry is always something that kind of sticks in my head. It was shared with me by a professor I had. Oh, whose name I've forgotten. And this other anecdote also comes from her, where she described moving to Canada and following the food, like having the food guide presented, and people saying like, if you don't follow the food guide, you're going to get scurvy or something like that. But the foods that she ate that prevented scurvy, that were like indigenous to her kind of environment, weren't available here, and so she was really, you know, it presents one way of doing things, but of course there's so many different ways of doing things, and if we're looking at kind of data that comes mostly from North America, then what might we be missing out on?
It might be fool's gold.
It might be fool's gold, yeah. But also, I'm really loving the book if people are looking for a book recommendation. We're getting to 1 o'clock. We'll keep going because I think these conversations are great, but also feel free to kind of move around if you want, write things down. Web pages.
So I submitted this term, but then I realized that I kind of run into an error of when you, like if I say web agent, I'm gonna use, oh, it's an agent for the web. I can say that, but I have to describe what an agent is at the beginning. So an agent, let me first define agent so I can define web agent. Agent would be, I like to define it as an independent entity that is in a closed environment, and the environment affects this entity, this agent, and the agent affects the environment. So there's like a feedback going on there. A web agent is simply this agent or this entity, and the environment is the web. So it can be any web browser. This, I don't know how to use it in a sentence. I guess I can say a web agent can help your grandma navigate the web. I work in web agents. I'm a master's student, and my master's thesis is based on web agents. It's a very, very, very popular topic in the research world right now. Agents in general, but web agents are also very big right now. They're big because they work really bad. So there's a lot of work to be done. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you for the term. I just have a quick question. So if someone came up to you and you mention web agent and they say, so chatbot, what would be the right response to that question? Because I think a lot of people can't differentiate between agent and chatbot. So
that's a really good question. So a lot of people think that ChatGPT, it's already a web agent, and it's not. It can navigate the web, but it's not in a closed environment with the web, right? It's not, it works in a different environment. So it could be a chatbot, but the point is that it has to somehow interact with that web browser and interact with the elements in the web browser. So a chatbot, if the only purpose is to answer your questions, then no. But if it interacts and you can see it, kind of have that feedback, that's what I'm talking about. Like you click something and then it gives something back. That's when it becomes like an agent. So it could be a chatbot because it gives you a response, but not all chatbots are agents.
I was just wondering if you could talk through some of the major challenges, like you said. I think there's a lot of criticism you hear that, they're just like clicking around on a website, it's just screenshots, it's not really doing anything. So what are some of the bottlenecks right now, and how do you see, let's say, the technology improving?
Okay, great question. There's a lot of bottlenecks right now. I was working on one, which is planning. So web agents right now are mostly LLMs. So LLMs have a hard time foreseeing things. So I can plan, I'm gonna buy Airbnb, like I'm gonna rent an Airbnb. So I can kind of, in my head, I know how the web works, so I can foresee what's gonna happen and kind of adjust if something doesn't go the right way. LLMs apparently are not very good at that. They're very bad at planning, like beforehand, and if they encounter something they don't expect, then they kind of freak out. And that's the thing about the web. The web is very dynamic. A page can be one way this day, a different way tomorrow. So it's very hard to make these LLMs or these LLM web agents adjust to those changes. So planning is a big bottleneck. There's something called grounding. So web contexts are very big. So you have HTMLs, which are huge. You have other web browser properties, and it's a lot of data. Like it's too much data to fit into an LLM context. So one bottleneck is to how do we pick the right properties to give the agent, right? It's like what we're talking about the prompts. It's like we cannot feed this whole thing, so we have to pick certain things that could be useful to complete the goal, right? Because the idea on a web agent always comes with a goal. Like you have to feed it a goal. It just doesn't navigate the web just to navigate. So I think planning and grounding, as I define it, they're the biggest bottlenecks. Yeah, it turns out that LLMs alone are not very good at agents. You have to reinforce it. So that's another tell. You have to use some reinforcement learning. But yeah, they're getting better, but you need a lot of compute to do that. And yeah, not everyone has that amount of data.
Yeah, thanks. Hi all, my name is Asfar. I'm a PhD candidate in computer engineering, and I'm just loving this discussion, especially the web agent thing. So I just get a feeling that as we know, use case defines the language. For example, we know that more people know the term GPT than Gen AI. Like if there is a general survey, most people will say that, yes, I know GPT, but what is Gen AI? So last week, as we know, Walmart announced that they are having a partnership with ChatGPT, and they are going to have this web agent. So if you want to do your grocery in Walmart, you just need to go to ChatGPT, and I'm not sure how it will work, but I think they will take your order and they will do the grocery for you. Mm-hmm. So I think there are high chances that this will be the very visible example of web agent. So I won't be surprised it becomes something like Wal GPT or Walmart GPT rather than web agent. So that's my feeling, like ultimately it's that use case, just like the way we talk about, like we don't say searching, we say like Googling, or we are not saying Gen AI, we are saying GPT as a general people. So maybe if we have to wait and see how it works. Thank you.
Yeah, I've seen that. Apparently, what my feeling is that they have a API that connects the two. So GPT doesn't have to go to the web and like search by itself to Walmart. It just has a direct connection to the API that Walmart has. OpenAI has its web agent. It's called, I think, Agent CUA or something like that. It's only for the US and it's $400 a month. So if you want to go to the US and pay and try it, let me know how it goes. But yeah, OpenAI is investing a lot of money. All the big companies are investing a lot of money on this. And they're not charging, it's very expensive. So they really want to get these agents to work.
Yeah, thanks. Loving the conversation. I'm also obsessed with agents because I'm a sociologist. We are obsessed with agency, but we think about agency often in the context of, or always kind of in relation to a structure or in opposition to a structure, really. We often think like if an agent has, if an entity has agentiality, it means they have power over the structures in which they exist. And then I also have this like other obsession going on with British cybernetics in general, but Gregory Bateson like in particular. And he talks about the unit and the environment and how a focus, so the kind of like the modern sciences, crisp focus on that agent question, who is the agent, who is the enlightenment human, kind of focusing on really the units, has actually created the environmental disaster that agent then finds himself in. So he says we should always think about the agent plus environment. We cannot think of these kind of like in isolation or even in opposition / like whatever relationality. So he's after something kind of like an entangled understanding. And you're also talking about dynamism of the web and how so it's kind of hard to get agents to act in ways that are predictable or to plan for it, which is a very sociological problem as well. So to me, I'm wondering if we are very focused on creating all these like fancy, cool agents, are we going to lose like what makes web kind of special or different? Are we going to, is there going to be an internet disaster as well, I guess? Because what I'm hearing so far also is kind of sad, because then agents are only being used to buy more things, right? So is it just going to be like more of consumption? Already we've lost the internet. Are we going to lose it more? I guess was just a ramble that I will.
Okay, so I kind of forgot the last things that you like to answer everything. So yes, that's the last thing you said. It was very interesting that if you think that web is going to change because of these agents. There was a paper that a friend of mine recently published, and he was mentioning how we can actually change the web to fit these web agents, right? So he was saying basically, oh, the web agents don't work well on how the web is right now. Why don't we change the web so that they can perform better? So I don't know if in the future no one's going to navigate the web. You're just going to talk to your agent and let it navigate. Well, it is scary whether how you see it, right? If you think maybe it's better that someone else navigates the web for us, it can be maybe safer, especially for kids. Or it can be like a total disaster, right? It's all based in the safety part of LLMs and how things are going right now. So yeah, it could be a crisis, it could not be a crisis, but it is something that is explored, that maybe changing the web might be the easiest way to make this work. So very interesting point. Yeah, and you mentioned something.
I mean, it wasn't really a question.
Yeah, like a conversation. Yeah. But yeah, so that's my thought. I don't know. It could be a crisis, it could be not. Web agents have also their ethical point of view that okay, if someone maybe has a visual impairment or physical impairment, they can navigate the web in an easier way. So, good things and bad things come with these solutions.
I just wanted to maybe make a couple word associations and see if you can just clarify, because I don't know the differences. So web agents, like Lindsay mentioned in the beginning, I think is already a tricky word to wrap our heads around sometimes. But the first thing it made me think about was my director has written a book on internet demons, the sort of algorithms that make internet routing infrastructures function, and they have their own forms of agency in doing so, which also makes me think more broadly of the terms like robots or bots, which are bots especially is used in internet and social media stuff. And so are we talking about generally the same ecosystem of things, or is there clear differences between a web agent and a bot? Or if someone calls a web agent a robot, is that an inappropriate
I would say
use of terms?
a bot is a web agent. Because if I define in the way that always an agent, and I don't know your name, but she was saying that agent always comes with an environment, right? And there's like that definition that agent has to be in an environment. So if a bot is this entity that kind of works in the web and that's its environment, it affects it and it gives feedback to it, then yeah, it could be an agent in that sense. But there's that sense that I don't know if the bots, if it gets feedback and then it affects it, or it just performs the action on and on without caring about the feedback. There has to be that interaction going on for it to be an agent. But yeah, a robot, a lot of people can define it as agents. Like if a robot has to navigate a certain room, then the environment is the room and the robot is the agent. So yeah, they're kind of interchangeable. Like it wouldn't be a mistake to say, oh, that robot is an agent. Just the robot has the sense that it's in the real world, like it's mechanical, while agent is purely artificial. So.
Great.
I just threw that in there in case it was going to be enticing to someone. But maybe we'll go to we can come back to it, and I'll just go to the ones that have been submitted.
Hello, everybody. All right, so I'll just start with the definition. I wrote it down so that I won't say the wrong thing. But so basically, I don't think this term exists. So it's an attempt to define something that I observed in the day-to-day work that I do. So it's basically, I would try to define it as the structured and multifaceted approach to evaluating the different impacts of AI technology in order to better inform adoption decisions. So I think now that we have so many tools and technologies popping up, the question comes very often about which tool should I use? Which one is suited for my use case? So these are questions that are often asked. And at least I'm from the eConcordia unit, so we develop a lot of all the university's online courses. So because we work primarily online, we come into contact with all kinds of different tools, and it becomes a bit of a challenge for us to determine which tool is good, which one is not. So the idea of using a systemic or multifaceted approach is to basically not have, for example, decide, well, I'm going to use this tool because I like it, or I'm going to use this tool because it works for me. So even when internally, we have a multidisciplinary approach where we have colleagues from different specialties evaluating different tools. So we have, like, for example, our IT colleagues who will perhaps ask questions about what are the implementation consequences of this tool. We have instructional designers who will ask, does this help us achieve our pedagogical objectives? We might have all kinds of, so I think it's important to basically use this, it's an attempt to define this in-between state where you might have users who are 100% pro AI, so they will love any AI tools. You'll also have people who are completely against the idea of AI, so I don't want to touch any of this. And this is kind of this in-between state on the spectrum where well, it depends, right? Is this tool suitable for our needs? What are, if we can circle back to the word responsible, does this align with the values of our group, for example? So I think it's a little bit generic in the sense that different organizations will have different factors and evaluation criteria, also different tolerances. So it's an attempt to define this non-anti-AI, but also not super pro-AI stance. Maybe the word prudence in and of itself is wrong in the sense that it might mean something like, it might mean that to someone that it means the same thing as skepticism, right? So when you say someone is prudent, is it the same as saying that they're skeptic about AI? So in a way, it's kind of to define this sort of flexible case-by-case kind of way of looking at AI, and that the objective is not to adopt AI at all costs as quickly as possible, is to ensure that adoption will actually serve, I guess in this case, human priorities, human values, human interests. So that's a quick summary of the term.
That's great. It makes me think of the, it's called like trans-feminist AI approaches or something like that, where one of the questions is, do we even need this technology? So it's like that middle ground where maybe we do, maybe we don't, but it's not always the answer, and it's not always the best answer.
Yeah, I have a similar comment. I love the moderation that it kind of invites, and yeah, obviously we are all sick of this AI bubble where like there's this fervor to include these agents into our lives. But then also I'm not a fan of the pessimism and cynicism that's permeating, especially elite critical circles. It's like, no, let's not have AI, let's just ban all these tools. Because, yeah, I think in the longer term, it's going to be these questions that we are able to ask that's going to shape, like it's not going to be the either extreme, it's going to be that kind of moderate path. So appreciate it.
I think I'll just wrap it up and go back to what we talked about at the beginning, the responsibility. I feel like everything that we talked about so far goes back to that. And for me, we talked about prudence, we talked about like environment, we talked about social causes. It's not a question of who is responsible. We are all responsible when we are developing, when we are adopting, when we are promoting, when we are doing the prompts. Everyone is responsible to adopt it or use it or share it in a way that promotes something that is for the common good instead of just doing it generically or promoting like the big corporate benefits. And going back to prudence also, for me, it's kind of equivalent for me to responsibility because it's in the middle, as you said. It's not very optimistic, it's not very cautious, it's really just thinking about the right way to approach it for everyone. And I'm sorry, my thoughts go all around the places, but that's what I was thinking about when we were all talking about all these words.
I appreciate what you said a lot because it is true that it is a shared responsibility, but I have been on enough punk / anarchist collectives in my life that I also recognize that sometimes when it's diffused, that responsibility, it sometimes becomes like in this no man's land where no one's doing the dishes. And so I understand why there is like both a request on your end, which makes a lot of sense to be for everyone to be like, take it into your hands. What portion are you responsible for? What can you provide? And then also a question from my other shoulder over here that's being like, who is it though, you know? Because like I've just seen it enough times that I know sometimes a shared responsibility means that no one's picked it up and taken it upon themselves, or that someone is shouldering it in like overexerting themselves and someone else is shirking it, you know, like it's all part of the dynamic.
I really like what you both just said, and yeah, that strongly resonates with me. I just wanted to like bring up a couple little word association. Like when you mentioned AI prudence, this is the first time I ever hear this term. I really like it because it made me think of like wisdom, reflection, slow thoughtfulness, like being prudent as opposed to. I mean, what's really making me think about it too is there's this book called How Reason Almost Lost Its Mind, and it's a history of basically the changing norms of sort of Enlightenment era reason as this sort of thoughtfulness and more like a sense of wisdom versus what happened, especially since Second World War and during the Cold War, was this development of a really cold, rationalistic, logic-oriented way of thinking and calling that sort of rationality the new form of reason, very problem solutionist sort of oriented. And so this sort of, for me, kind of like gives us a little wink towards that, like, hey, let's slow down and figure out this AI thing instead of rushing towards the most logical solution we can immediately come up with. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up those associations, and thank you for bringing up this term.
I think when, we talked about solution, intervention, and I think one intervention that I think could be useful, but we need to think about ways to implement it in broader way, is to provide education to people. Because the reason why he's able to talk about prudence is in the context of his work. He knows what are the requirements, what are the things that we can do and cannot do. And it's not given to anyone to be able to have this thoughtful process. And I think to provide a basic understanding of what is AI in general to everyone, and I am biased, I am an educational lead, but I think that's what could help people go to that thought process to really think about like AI in general in a prudent way instead of being very optimistic or very skeptical. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Do we have time? Is that okay? I actually have the pleasure of working with Peng, so I got a preview of the word, and we briefly discussed it earlier this week. And for me, what was super interesting was the notion of the instinct of AI at all costs, and then kind of like calculating or having maybe some sort of metric to explore what's lost in the implementation of AI. And I read a really cool bit by a writer who was using generative AI to automate correspondence with their mother to build a stronger relationship with them. And I just thought that that was really funny. That was just a little bit of an ironic use of the tool and of the what is lost factor. Period, not a question.
I guess someone must have alluded to it. I think maybe you, Jada, that and you also alluded to it a little bit, Matilda, that I feel like when we have these conversations, we have them in bubbles, right? So we're hearing each other's perspectives, and we're sitting in such a privileged environment when it comes to knowledge, right? Which is the thing that AI democratizes the most. But there are still so many places in the world where access to knowledge is, very expensive, inaccessible. Even having the basic foundations, being able to read, being able to write, isn't even there. So on the one hand, I'm wondering what this conversation would sound like, what these lexicons would sound like defined in different environments. And when I think of prudence, and I think of just prudence being, as you described, having a tinge of responsible, having a just like what is the way it should go. The idea that it's defined differently based on different people's needs. So this idea of building a stronger relationship with your mother using like AI letters might sound ludicrous to someone who might have strong social skills, but to someone who just like they just have no idea where to start, and they have no one to talk to advise them. Like the AI is a starting point that they would have been crippled without otherwise, right? And so for me, I think that idea of different realities coming to the tool for different needs at different starting points is a little humbling in some ways, because it's like my need may be big or small, but someone's need may be life-threatening or life-changing or game-changing or earth-shattering, like, different needs, different contexts. And the customization of the knowledge of the tool is that it can meet me at my starting point and meet you at your starting point, and customize it for each one of us. So I think this idea of the lexicon being the terms meaning different things for different people, and then putting a lens of class, a lens of culture, a lens of race, a lens of access onto it, just like almost implodes all the different places that it can go.
Thank you. Yeah, that's super helpful to frame our conversation and think about the different ways we're approaching these words and tools. I didn't think I could feel sympathetic for someone using it to get closer to their mother, but you gave a good example. Any thoughts on that?
The thing, I really appreciate the point that you're bringing forward, Debbie. I also work at the AI Institute, but I'll just preface this by saying I am not one of the AI specialists, and that's not my background at all. I have a critical studies background, which obviously comes with its problems. And by that, I mean, I'm very critical, and sometimes, and it is often to try and be aware of the ways in which all of those intersections that you mentioned do shape in life, but it's often coming from a very privileged place, which means that sometimes you miss a lot. The thing, though, that really stresses me out about AI and is this kind of idea that there is a democratization of knowledge through it, because sometimes it's wrong. And the more that you know about a subject, the more when you get a response back, you're like, oh, I see everything that's wrong in here. And then the less you know, the more that you're like, I accept it, like this must be right. And so like, if you read my prompts, you'll see that almost all of them are like, name your sources. because I have that stress, and I always, it freaks me out sometimes when I talk to people and they're like, but I'm not smarter than the chat. And I'm like, the chat is not intelligent. The chat, like in my mind, scientists out here, correct me if I'm wrong, the chat is a language model. It's not it's not that it's necessarily intelligent or that it necessarily holds a lot of knowledge. It just holds a lot of data. And so I both agree with you, Debbie, that these words will definitely change based on who is defining them. But then there's the part where you said it was democratizing knowledge, like gave me this like knee-jerk reaction where I had to say something, because it is stressing me out that people are trusting themselves less often. And when they get something back from generative AI, maybe not in this room, but in other rooms where I've been, and they're like, well, this must be right. The computer said it. And it reminds me of just like when I was in like libraries talking to, older people, being like, just because it came from something that said that it was Revenue Quebec doesn't mean it came from Revenue Quebec, and that kind of, that prudence that I think we need to also bring to that interaction with these generative AI tools. Yeah, please.
Yeah, obviously the literacy, right? The how do we build AI literacy, or how do we deal with kind of the objectivity of the object crisis? But honestly, as you're talking, I'm thinking like what was the form in which knowledge traveled before even web, right? Like, I mean, I was born into like a Wikipedia age or something, at least once I gained my reasoning faculties. So anyway, I guess I was born in this democratization kind of landscape. And I'm thinking before that, I probably could only access knowledge if I was, a pupil of a master, if I was learning from someone, or if I had access to the inner sanctum of the thick walls of academia. So there was always these kinds of like power differentials, like these, I mean, knowledge is power, or knowledge comes with power. So this kind of, and if I was hearing from like a teacher and an instructor, like, a certain kind of fact, I would take that as a fact. I wouldn't question that either. And of course, those were also changing and changed. So we should always have that kind of self-reflection going into the knowledge, like it's our responsibility as learners. It's not up, because we cannot contend with that power. I cannot intervene, just as I couldn't intervene in the thick walls of academia. So I think this will always come wrapped up in, so I think there's a democratization. I completely agree with that, because we know how access is kind of distributed and privileged. But I'm thinking, yeah, we should just go ahead and do more knowledge, which is like, let's build our literacies around it, yeah.
You made me think of something like kind of random, but hopefully it connects back in. I have 3 kids. They're 16, 14, and 11. So they're 2 Gen Z and 1 Gen Alpha. And, like, what's interesting is the AI world, like you were thinking about like, what generation am I? I'm in the generation where my best friend and I drove out to see the optic cable being dug and put into a ditch behind my house. Like, I remember staying up all night trying to download a song. But for my kids, as teenagers, like as they came into awareness now, they don't even recognize what is AI. They'll type a search into Google, they'll get an answer back, and that is the answer. That's their search. Like, they don't even identify that as AI. Because we live in a bilingual context, they'll use DeepL or Google Translate to help them with their paper. They're using it for translation, like they generate the thing, but they don't even know that one is AI versus not. Like, it's just like sometimes the tools will become so invisible. And I think about like, my kids use very advanced digital signal processing without ever thinking about it. So like, I interact with my like nephew who's a toddler, and if you ask somebody of our generation, hey, somebody's giving you a phone call and you play pretend, they'll hold their hand up to their ear. But my nephew will hold his palm up in front of his face. Oh, grandma's calling, let me talk to them. And this is how they hold the phone in front of them. because it would be inconceivable to put a phone up to your ear because then you wouldn't be able to see who was calling you. And so it's just like these things shift. And I think like for us, we're still observing the AI. But for people who are coming up behind us, who are having these tools available for their creativity, their use in school, they might not even be able to distinguish, let alone web agents or anything else. It's all like, it just exists. It's like the water for a fish. It's just all around, you know, like in the same way that cell phones or video calls and things are.
Oh. Are you directly responding to that? Okay, I'll go after.
Just, I'm not going to add too much. I wanted to like kind of like add like kind of like more to that, like, and so far that like I don't even know if it's just like a generational thing, because a lot of times like I spend way too much time online arguing with people about AI, and I think a lot of times a lot of like the strongest voices against like whenever you even like mention the letters A and I, like when and they there are a lot of people who kind of like are the quickest to kind of like get mad at you are the ones who don't realize the ubiquity of what can be considered AI in the systems that we all use. And I think a big part of the problem is that like AI has become so capacious that it could it almost can mean anything that isn't algorithm. So people don't kind of like, or they don't know how stuff like kind of like algorithms or LLMs or anything like that kind of like work in terms of kind of like translation tools, which have become ubiquitous. Yeah, so that's all.
I just, in response to kind of more on what Francesca was saying, you know, I think there's a quote from Nick Cernacek's Platform Capitalism, which is data is evidence that something has happened, and then knowledge is the why that happened. And those things, I think, are really oftentimes, certainly online, indistinguishable. And it also, you know, kind of it coming down to what we deem as intelligent with response to how we're interpreting information. And I think, you know, this externalized notion of our artificial intelligence is coming, you know, similar to what Robert was saying earlier, of it's coming out of a hierarchy of what constitutes intelligence. And so, you know, our intuition, our emotional response, our physical intelligence, all of that gets lost in and absorbed by sort of what is now being told to us from something that is inherently factual, is rooted in data that is now exclusive from the messiness of those other human intelligences. And so thinking about sort of, you know, access to how we then differentiate between what is being told to us and developing that literacy, I think that I share in sort of that fear of what, you know, what that means for those that are more and more exposed to artificial intelligence as being inherently more intelligent than they are, which is sort of, you know, this, again, this discussion around prudence is really as a little bit of a grounding thought or term to remind us that we are engaged with this intelligence, we're not removed from it.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really, that just kind of made me think of, well, this broader discussion on like democratization of AI, which has me now thinking about the word democratization itself as something we maybe should add to this list, because like, you know, it seems to invoke, you know, notions of justice, distribution of resources or capacities or access. But I think there's really an interesting, there's like the way that democratization is used in the AI space seems to be like 99.9% about access, democratizing the access to these tools. But if we look at the actual word democracy, like democracy, the rule of the many or the rule of the demos, it's talking about power, control, rule. And that, what does that look like in the context of AI, that the people, the masses, actually have a certain power or control over it? I think that inherently would require these broader sorts of developing literacy and access and education, like all these broader social structures around AI, that when we just talk about democratizing AI systems and tools, we're just talking about access. So that's not, by definition, democratization. We're talking about something else, and maybe we need to figure out what that something else is and use that word instead. I don't know, just a random thought.
When you were talking, I was thinking about a conversation that I had with a colleague. I work at the Applied AI Institute as well. And he said that we are probably the last generation that actually use this word prudence, because all the older generations, they are born the same way that they were born. Are we born with internet? They will be born with AI. So they will not think about the behind the scene. They will not think about like everything that we are doing right now. They won't do it. We are the last generation who is actually thinking about all that. And I was also thinking about another discussion that I had at a conference where everything was really about critical thinking for AI. What's the consequences of AI on critical thinking? And the conclusion was that it removes, and I think maybe you've seen the paper that said that AI actually diminishes our critical thinking, but I don't have the data to prove it, but I feel like we can actually increase our critical thinking in this age of AI because we know how it works. And for me, that's why also education literacy is very important. Once you know how it works, you use your critical thinking to be prudent. And I know I'm saying it, sorry, I don't know where I'm going, but it just makes me think that our generation, the importance of critical thinking is really important, because we are going to teach the next generation things that are obvious for them, like how to use AI if they won't think about it. So for us, beyond knowing what AI is and the basics of AI, critical thinking for me is really associated with this word, to be able to inform what the future will look like. Just wanted to say that.
Going to switch to the, who had AI teammate? Okay, I think this is our, maybe our last one. And thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nandini. I'm doing my PhD up at McGill, up on the hill, in education. And my research is on how young children think about AI and learn from AI as they encounter it in the home. So theory of artificial minds is sort of a proposed novel theoretical framework that extends theory of mind, which is about how humans understand other humans, to AI. And so it's sort of this, we're thinking of it as sort of a reciprocal ability to understand and infer internal states about AI systems from a human perspective, and in order to predict and to understand behavior between human and AI systems, right? So where would we use it? We'd use it to understand any sorts of human-AI interactions that are happening at home, in the workplace, in an educational setting and beyond. And so just as an example of in a sentence, a person's interactions with AI are influenced by their theory of artificial mind. So as you can see, it's just sort of a play on the idea of theory of mind. So why is this important? Well, as we've been talking about in the last hour, conversational AI sort of represents a new entity in our social world. People are already talking to it as a teacher, as a tutor, sometimes as a therapist, sometimes as a friend, sometimes as a coworker. And so basically what human conceptions are about AI systems are extremely important. So what we want to do is to have a robust theoretical model which sort of explains from birth onwards how exactly human beings think about AI. And what's their conception about them. And so just as sort of theory of mind provides insights about how human beings understand other human beings. Our idea is that the theory of artificial minds will help us understand how humans interact with AI systems, how they understand how they work, and maybe allow us potentially to even predict humans' behavior. And then, again, as I mentioned, this is a novel framework, so we're looking to develop what it means, what are some of the underlying competencies, and hopefully we'll see this being used cross-culturally as well as in interdisciplinary sense.
Hi, did I hear you say that from birth onwards? Because I can imagine the theory of human mind, even from before birth, you can explore sort of, honestly, newborns and how their mind develops, how their brain function, cognitive function develops. And if I understand what you're saying, it kind of implies some kind of study where we're interacting from birth onwards with artificial intelligence. Is that?
Yes, so to just tie it back to my own PhD research, a lot of children grow up around smart speakers. So my research looks at, as a little child talking to Alexa or Google Assistant, what's their conception of what's going on? Do they think it's a robot? Do they think there's a person on the other side? So that's sort of the way we're looking at it. So from birth, meaning as a child, let's say, encounters AI, let's say in the form of a smart speaker, but maybe it's a tutor, maybe it's people are increasingly using it in, let's say, smart toys, storytellers, etc. So what's a child's conception of these systems? And again, at a very minimum, AI is just a new entity in our world, so we need to understand how humans think about it.
Super interesting and love this a lot. And as you're talking, I was thinking how, so now we are thinking, just because someone said this is artificial intelligence, we started thinking this is some sort of a mind, I think. And I'm thinking especially, so in sociology, the way we understand mind is just as everything else is like a social thing, right? Like the whole social realm in which we exist also has an imprint in our minds that sets up the structures in which we think and understand. So there is no escape from this theory of mind, I guess. But then I'm also thinking when we look at other cultures and how they've been thinking about minds or internality, I guess that's like more what's lying or what the nugget is there. And I'm thinking about my collaborator who's a Lakota person. She talks about the internality of the stones in that culture. Stones have an internal consistency that makes them kind of agential in their lives. And some stones do have internality, some don't. These are all also like very context dependent and contingent kind of articulations. So I'm wondering, like, what makes an artificial mind a mind? Like, what differentiates, I guess, like an AI from a stone, really? And of course, there are arguments around like extended cognition. You would know a lot better than I do. So I guess I'm asking, are you staying on like a psychological? I'm understanding this is more like a psychology type of conception. Like, are you staying there, or are you also extending into culture, etc., to gauge this kind of terminology and also giving mind to the artificial agent?
Sure. No, thank you so much for your comments. See, at this stage, my background is in learning sciences and cognitive science, so very familiar with the notion of. We're sort of looking at early stages of how does a human being perceive this artificial entity? I know the word artificial mind obviously begets interpretations of it having its own mind, etc. It's also just sort of a play off the term theory of mind, the notion of I understand that you have a mind and that's separate from my mind. And as children develop, they sort of, as they grow up, they sort of come to that understanding. So other researchers have called it things like theory of robot mind, theory of AI mind. So we're using sort of different terminology, but the idea at its basic core is, from a psychological sense, how does a person understand how these systems work? Do they attribute any sort of personhood, false belief, intentionality, emotion, as we're seeing it happening at the moment, right? We are seeing some people viewing some of these systems as, almost as if it's a person. So without getting into the normativity of whether this should be happening or whether this stuff actually is intelligent, we are sort of saying it is happening. There is another entity in our world, and we need to understand how human beings think of it. And that could go actually from the spectrum of being highly critical and thinking it has no mind to thinking actually it's quite intelligent and it does have a mind. So that's sort of where we're at. And as I mentioned, it's at a novel stage. So we're at early sketches of this. Yeah.
I just had a quick thought, again, from like a real world example of people since I have kids, there are some forward thinking librarians and teachers who are actually teaching AI etiquette, which are, because it is kind of this hybrid, they've kind of grown up around AI, but they don't. They're kind of teaching polite ways to communicate with these artificial minds, because the teachers and librarians are finding that if somebody speaks rudely to this AI, kind of as an outlet, then that can translate into how they actually interact with their peers or their friends. So I think that's kind of interesting. Like with the theory of artificial mind, once you understand that, you can better guide AI etiquette or norms to kind of teach people how to communicate with them.
Sure. And also understanding what are the limits of the technology, and that, there isn't actually a person on the other end or any sorts of emotional connection that may be possible. Yeah.
I'm just curious, this is really interesting. It sounds like this is not at all like where you're focusing your research, but have you thought about looking also at this whole industry of like intimate AI companions that are being marketed as like literally using like catchphrases like speak with an AI that actually cares, and they emphasize actually cares as if there's somehow something different in these little offerings that they're giving? And like, so have you looked into any of this sort of industry?
Yeah,
and the way people are
absolutely. I
interpreting
mean, certainly very familiar. I will have to admit, I'm a very critical scholar, and I do find a lot of this stuff very uncomfortable. I do think, and that's, again, it relates back to this notion of but from a sense of descriptively, how are people viewing this technology, right? So I would say, as a researcher, I'm very interested, but I do have major concerns, especially with not only, of course, we're talking about adults wanting to have intimate conversations. That's certainly, but that's their prerogative. But a lot of times there are smart toys and smart companions being marketed to children. And then there've been recent examples of, there's a smart robot, there's sort of a companion to a child, then there's sort of issues that happen with the technology. Let's say the robot has to get bricked. How do you explain to a child that that's actually not a companion, that's a technology? So it can get very, very messy in that sense. But certainly it's interesting to see how people are forming connections. That's definitely of research interest.
Yeah, super interesting. This is somewhat related to that question, because the first thing that I thought of when you were discussing this research is thinking about like a lot of linguistic research on young children. And the first place my mind went to was how early, like, obviously gender identity constructions happen, and how more and more research is also seeing how those normative constructions are really reinforced and in many cases exacerbated online, and what your thoughts are in concerning what that looks like in really, really early childhood development.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many ideas that sort of get subtly reinforced, and voice assistants are such a great example of this. Nearly all the voice assistants either have female names or have female voices. And what does that really mean then in terms of this notion of an assistant, someone who's sort of helping around things in the house will automatically have a female intonation and things. And then we also see with research with children, there is a lot of gendering that's happening to the robots, and there's a lot of she's, and she thinks this way, and I like this robot because she's a girl, etc. So So, and that's why, to just come back to the idea that from birth, it looks like a lot of kids, especially in the West, are seeing this technology. It may have an impact on not only what they think about, how this technology works, but then also things like, what they think about the nature of the work when you're, asking for the weather. And then to come back to how you speak, there's a lot of preliminary research saying kids get quite rude with Alexa. And then, sure, Alexa can't really feel bad, but do we want our kids telling someone to shut up and things like that? So it really brings up a whole host of social conventions, notions of how you know things, how you think other people know things. So it's a very fascinating space, very rich in terms of the research at the moment, yeah.
I think the idea that Alexa can't feel bad but yes, is the behavior of the student. I think not only can these agents not feel bad, but their affective repertoires are very limited. So they can't express, rage, disgust, so that's also coded as feminine in many ways. The ways that we respond to people, maybe use humor to deflect feeling uncomfortable, but the language that they're using and the emotions that they're expressing through that language, even if the emotions don't exist within them, it's still embedded in the ways that they're speaking and responding to.
There's a lot of concern from psychologists, especially if we're thinking about AI friends, which I think is a very hot topic at the moment, is that it sort of encourages this notion of a frictionless relationship.
Right.
That someone who you're talking to will always agree with you, will always say, hey, you have a fantastic idea. No one will ever push back. So again, we're thinking about children growing up in this environment, but even for adults, I don't think that could be very, very positive to only have this frictionless sort of interaction where there's no one saying, hey, I don't think that's what you're doing is the right thing. So it's
That makes
interesting.
me uncomfortable, or I hate you right now.
That it just also makes me think, because it's like a continuation but an exacerbation of a lot of the things that people were critically saying about bubbles that were created by algorithms, and then even before that, just this, because I come from a feminist background and a queer background, there was a lot of have these very difficult conversations with people, and if they don't agree with you, out they go, this very highly boundaried and non-porous approach that we have to social relationships, which has clear benefits and then also some clear drawbacks, which is that the clear benefits being that you can have these conversations where everyone around you is very politically in alignment with you, and then the clear drawbacks being that the differences are ever broadening, and these two camps have a very hard time speaking to one another. I even think about someone is watching Fox all day, or someone is listening to NPR all day. I apologize, I am American. Those are very American examples. They have just access to very different facts, and so they have a very difficult time having a conversation, even on the same topic. But it's very interesting to think about that in the context of AI, because it's it brought those things that we were talking about already into a different and further along sphere.
We have 5 minutes left. This has been great. I'm not sure what the best thing to do is with the last 5 minutes. If people have closing remarks, they can share. You could also put some things on this table over here. I think, if you're interested in doing something else similar to this in the future, maybe with more, get all the words, bring them in, let me know. The forum will stay live, so people can keep submitting. I lost the clicker again. Oh, here it is. So I'm not even sure what I had next, but I'm really grateful for you all sharing these and then responding to words that people have shared. It's been really great. Yeah, that's it.